Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. It's not a good time to be religious, at least not if you want to be well thought of in society. Religion, of course, has been under attack since even before Jesus' time, but those attacks have intensified lately. Many of us are familiar with the shade thrown when someone says, "I'm spiritual but not religious," as though one is good and the other bad. But more recently, organized religions have taken on an even more negative light. In Afghanistan, as the country is in turmoil, the varying expressions of Islam have been highlighted through the different approaches of the fallen Afghan government, of ISIS or ISIS-K, and the Taliban, who have taken control of the country. Closer to home, those who adhere to the Christian religion have come under increasing scrutiny as the public becomes more aware of the connection of Christian churches to the residential schools, especially as more unmarked graves are discovered. There is ample evidence for one to conclude that it is actually religion that is the problem, and many have come to that conclusion. All religion, they reason, must be bad and should be avoided. And yet today we hear that religion that is pure and undefiled before God is to care for orphans and widows in distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. That sounds noble and good. Perhaps we've just been doing religion wrong all this time. But if you've come here today for instructions, it's not going to be easy. We only looked at 2 readings today, not including the psalm, and they seem to be saying the opposite of each other. First, we heard from the letter of James. He is the source of the quote that I've repeated twice already, the one about true religion. It seems as though he might be a good place to look if we're hoping for a direction on how to navigate this complicated world. And James spells things out for his reader, plainly, simply. Do not be merely hearers of the word, instead, be doers of the word. Sounds simple, right? Straightforward. But hold on just a minute. Before you get too excited and run off to start doing things, we have to look at what the gospel says. What does Jesus say? Well, based on his interactions with the Pharisees and scribes, Jesus seems to say that we ought not to be merely doers of the word. If we do things without purpose, we are deluding ourselves. We become hypocrites. We can understand what James is saying. Empty words are worthless if they aren't accompanied by actions. But Jesus makes his audience realize that there are such things as empty actions as well. These empty actions are what has come to exemplify religion in the minds of so many critics. And that's what Jesus is warning against. Any action, especially if it is a routine action or part of a religious ritual, has the potential of becoming an empty action, signifying nothing, not accomplishing anything. I think we can see this in our religious setting. It's not hard to get so attached to one aspect of what we do at church that we forget why we do it at all. Pretty soon that action, and you can fill in your own blank here for whatever makes the most sense to you, particular songs or prayers or gestures even, among many possible examples, any of them can become empty, hollowed out of the meaning and significance they once had. I think even giving alms, donating to the poor or to the church, for example, can become empty and meaningless gestures if we have stopped recognizing what is behind that giving, what it means. But then, how do we know if we are merely hearing and not doing? And even more challenging, how can we tell if the actions we are doing are just empty gestures? This is where the metaphor that James uses comes in handy. James talks about a mirror, and what is necessary is looking in the mirror, or put another way, self-reflection. We need to take some time reflecting on what we do and what is important to us so that we can see what God is revealing to us. God is, as we heard, the Father of lights and the giver of every good gift that comes down from above. What good is a mirror if we don't have light? And what good is a mirror if it doesn't show us an accurate reflection of ourselves? God has given us an incredible gift, the gift of self-reflection. If we take the time to reflect, if we gaze deeply into the mirror, we will see ourselves reflected back to us. If we take the time to look deeply, God will give us a perfect gift from above. Our Father of lights will enlighten our vision and allow us to see ourselves clearly, that we might know our intentions and see when they are evil or when our actions are empty, that we might see who we are and that we might also see who we might become. But seeing alone is not enough. If we reflect on who we are and on who God is calling us to be, we need to act on that as well. We cannot be mere seers. We need to be doers as well. And that is hard work. It's hard work just taking the time to reflect, to really take the time to understand our own motivations and intentions, evaluating our actions and what is behind them. And it is never really completed either. It's a lifelong process. But the work doesn't stop at just seeing and recognizing who we are and who we might become, because the work continues. It continues as we struggle to become what we see, as we strive to do those things that matter most, to do the actions that have meaning and express God's will for our lives and for this world. Do we have the courage to look deeply, to really understand who we are, to self-reflect both individually and as a community, seeing ourselves as God sees us and striving to become what God sees we might become? Or do we do what's easy and turn away from the reflection and immediately forget what we look like, taking the path that's easy? May God increase in us pure religion. May we be unstained by this world as we seek to serve those in need, expressing our faith in actions and not empty gestures, not falling into patterns and habits, but genuinely helping the widow, the orphan, the poor, the lonely. May we see God's will for our lives when we look deep into ourselves. And may we seek to bring that picture into reality.